Welcome to the Spend Life Well show, where we talk about all things faith and finance, helping you align your values with your wealth. I'm Certified Kingdom Advisor Mark Trice. Thanks for listening to today's show. We're going to get into a little bit of college planning today because it's that time of year. Juniors and seniors are making college visits. It's the FAFSA season, which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And we found over the years in our practice helping families prepare for college that a lot of families make mistakes when it comes to completing the FAFSA form. So we're going to kind of talk about those things. It's not just a form that you're having to fill out, and there's lots of misinterpretations about the FAFSA form, and they rush to get it done because it's a pain, and they don't realize how differently FAFSA, the process, views money than they do. In other words, FAFSA is looking at your wealth in one way, where you're maybe thinking of your wealth in a different way. And we want to kind of clear that up a little bit. But this is where, the diligence and stewardship show up in a practical way, okay? I think one of the first things that we should mention, and it's not really part of my outline that I've prepared for the day, but that is should I do the FAFSA? Because a lot of people think they're too wealthy and there's no reason for them to do it. But I'm going to remind you of some scripture, Proverbs 21:5, which basically says that the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Careful planning really matters in this aspect. Everyone should be completing the FAFSA form. Now, you may be applying to a private college university. They may use the CSS profile, which is a slightly different version of a financial aid form, and they look at money completely different. But today we're talking about the FAFSA form and a few lesser known mistakes that people tend to make when they're completing the form. And the difference is here, it may cost you financial aid. Not necessarily merit-based aid, but certainly financial aid. Now, why would I want to complete it if I have a high income and lots of assets and things? Because many colleges will not even let you apply for student work study type jobs that are funded by the university and the federal government loans and things. These are forgivable notes, if you will, or forgivable loans in the form of your child's doing some work on campus, but a lot of them will not even allow them to be eligible for that type of benefit if you don't complete the forms. So make sure you do it. Student assets versus parent assets. This is a really complicated issue. A lot of times, you've been doing a great job, mom and dad, of trying to prepare your child to save up money for college. And that's great. But how you have assets that are earmarked for college titled can make a big difference on how much the family is expected to contribute. So the mistake that people make a lot of times is they have almost all the assets for college in the child's name. They could be in savings accounts, different gifts and things like that, or even uniform gift minor accounts and things of that nature. So most of the time, mom and dad think this is really responsible, and it is, except for when you're trying to qualify for financial aid. So here's what FAFSA does, okay? FAFSA looks at the assets, the owner of the assets, in two different ways. For students, their assets are assessed up to 20%. In other words, they're saying if little Johnny or little Susie has $1,000 in their savings account, up to 20% of that can be counted towards the financial aid that the child should be willing to pay towards their education. That gets taken off the top. But the parents' assets are only assessed at roughly about 5.64%. Okay? That is much different than 20%. So if you take the same $1,000 and it's in mom's account, even though you've got that technically earmarked for little Susie's college fund, the FAFSA calculation and how much the family is expected to contribute gets calculated a lot differently and more beneficial to the family. So having that same $1,000 can hurt your eligibility in different ways that people probably didn't think about. Okay, what should you do instead? Well, you want to avoid building large balances in student-owned accounts, all right? And this includes 529s because they're also, even though they're technically owned by the parent, FAFSA looks at it as an asset that was designated for the child. And of course, in those situations, almost all of it's geared towards your education. It does, they do ask about those balances there. So you want to avoid that. You may even want to, because as a result of the Secure Act, you can use some of the 529 funds for different types of educational expenses before college. You may want to think about using some of those things before you fill out and complete the FAFSA. Okay, item number 2 here. Divorced or separated parents. We see people make mistakes on this all the time. Here's the mistake. You make the mistake of putting on the FAFSA form the assets and the income of the parent who claims the child on their taxes. Okay? If you're claiming your child on your taxes, that may or may not be the best person to report your income and assets. And you make the mistake sometimes of assuming that only the income from one household counts. It actually both can count. FAFSA actually looks at which parent the student lived with most in the last 12 months. Which parent did the student live with in the most in the last 12 months? And they look at, did one of the parents remarry? If that's the place where the child spent the most time and they remarried, guess what? The step-parent income gets to be included on the FAFSA calculation. And this often catches families off guard. Or they'll make mistakes with this without knowing the rules. So what should you do? Be clear on where the student lived, okay? If you all have a divorce decree that says the student stays with you 50-50, make sure that there's more than 6 months of time at one place. So you understand how if you get remarried, that can affect the numbers and what you qualify for. And just don't assume that your tax filing status determines whether or not you're the FAFSA parent or not, okay? All right, item number 3. The rules changed with the FAFSA. They made some rules about 2 years ago. So the mistake that people make is they assume that the chances of financial aid will improve dramatically when they have a second child in college. I've got 3 in college right now. It doesn't help as much as it used to. And if you're getting that advice that says, hey, you're going to have more benefits because you have multiple children in college, that's simply not true. It's to some extent it's true, but it removes a lot of the benefit that FAFSA used to attribute to that. And a lot of families are caught off guard. They don't realize that until the award letter arrives from the college or university that your child is attending. So you really want to treat each child's financial aid situation as an independent case, all right? You don't want to rely on the notion of, hey, we'll get a big break when we have multiple kids in college. And I empathize with you if you've got multiple kids in college, because that's a lot of money. You want to plan on preparing for funding for college as if that is not going to happen. All right, here's another big one. Big mistake people make. And it's the prior year tax trap. So the mistake is oftentimes we don't think about financial transactions and decisions until it's after the fact. So we have to plan ahead a few years in advance to think about what this financial transaction is going to do to my child's FAFSA calculations that may be a couple of years away. You know, things like doing Roth conversions, which are great things to do sometimes. Big bonuses that you didn't expect. Selling a property that's an investment property. Or doing any type of large withdrawals. Those can impact that numbers. So FAFSA goes back and looks at your tax years 2 years in the past. So 2 years back. That impacts you 2 years forward. So think about those. You just want to make sure that if you have a child that's college bound, they're a freshman or a sophomore, you need to be thinking about every financial decision and how that might impact, big financial decision and how that might impact the FAFSA process. So if you have kids approaching high school, be mindful of those things. It's okay, you can do it, but just be careful about those things. You just got to realize that college planning overlaps many years here, more than we typically might expect. So let's talk a little bit about a spiritual perspective on all this, because really there are two different types of aid, or three different types of aid really. You got merit-based, which is because they're good students, so they get scholarships. You've got need-based, which is financial related. And you can go find out on every college website. They should have financial aid section, what they call an expected family contribution calculator. And you want to make sure that you're using that so you know what it might truly cost. But let's talk about a spiritual perspective here. This is a lot of training and conversations that you should have with your child. They need to understand what it's going to cost them. Luke 16:10 says, whoever can be trusted with very little can be trusted with much. And we're just talking about, in this situation, faithfulness with little things. And really, completing the FAFSA is a really practical example of practicing stewardship. And a little preparation here and there can prevent years of unnecessary debt. We're going to have a podcast in the future probably about debt and my opinion on that. So good questions to ask yourself through this process is, am I starting early enough? It's never too early to start planning for your child's education, college education. Ask yourself, do I understand how this big financial decision might impact that going forward? And the third thing is am I seeking guidance or wisdom from people that understand this process? There have been a plethora of people that have got into this niche of trying to help families navigate the college process, including getting the most aid and trying to figure out how to pay for college. We do that in our office as financial advisors, so we can help you with that. But seek some advice. This is so important. So just to wrap up a little bit, the FAFSA carries more weight than people realize. And the small misunderstandings can really cost you a lot in potential aid or other types of grants. And so working on it now, getting a little clarity, helping yourself understand what's involved in the FAFSA, is going to potentially save you money in the future. So don't wait. It's about that time. If you have a senior in high school and they're going to college next year, the deadlines are coming up real soon. And so things that you did in the past are really not things you can correct now. But make sure you know which assets to count and how you can move things around before you do the FAFSA. And, just my advice is to really start early on this process. Talk to an advisor. You can give us a call. You can email us at info@clearvistafinancial.com. Give us a call at 254-282-0495. You can actually text that number too, 254-282-0495. And as always, you can see additional podcasts and additional resources by visiting our website at clearvistafinancial.com. Folks, I want to thank you for listening. College is such an important part of our children's lives, and I'm thankful that you listened to this podcast. Look out for additional things on college planning. Until then, you've been listening to the Spend Life Well Show.
Securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors Incorporated, a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Clear Vista Financial are not affiliated. Discussions in the show should not be construed as recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions.